But it also, on top of that, has like local governance duties as well. Not dissimilar to how Hamas operates in Gaza. Hamas has a military, a standing army, alongside other standing militant groups as well. However, Hezbollah is not the Hezbollah is a militant group that also has a political party and has political aspirations and works in governance as well.
Live, Israel says its troops in Gaza are engaged in face-to-face combat with fighters from Hamas. The Israeli military says its troops have now completely encircled Gaza City in the north of the territory, almost 4 weeks since the start of this war. The US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has been back in Tel Aviv as Washington increases the pressure for a humanitarian pause. Antony Blinken talked about Israel's right to defend itself, but also the need for concrete steps to minimize harm to civilians in Gaza. Meanwhile, the leader of Hezbollah, like Hamas, a proscribed terror organization, has spoken in Lebanon. Hassan Nasrallah praised the Hamas attacks and said the possibility of total war is realistic. One other important line to update you on: more foreign nationals have been getting out of Gaza at the Rafah crossing point into Egypt. 124 British nationals are on the list of people who are being allowed to leave. Well, the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza says more than 9,000 people have been killed in the Strip since October the 7th, after Hamas killed 1,400 people in the attacks in southern Israel. Well, we'll be covering all the latest developments here with my colleague, the BBC's chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, and she joins us from Jerusalem. Lise, over to you.
Yes, and welcome back to Jerusalem. We had a few hours ago a split-screen moment here across the region with the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken addressing the press after his meetings with Israeli leaders, emphasizing how much the United States would do to assist in easing the suffering of Palestinians and working, he said, with the U.S.'s partners in the region to avoid an escalation. At the same time, the Lebanese leader, Hasan Nasrallah, making his first public speech since the war began after October the 7th, blaming the United States for what he said the crimes of the Gaza war, and as we've just heard, warning of the possibility of an all-out war.
No, I'm not going to listen to the entire speech because the speech is long as fuck and he just repeats himself over and over again. So, no, I'm not going to listen to the entire thing.
Well, let's look at those two top stories, starting with Antony Blinken. He spoke to the press after he met the Israeli President Isaac Herzog. He reaffirmed his solidarity with Israel, but he also mentioned his hopes for what is being described as a pause, a humanitarian pause in the fighting.
That was an important area of discussion today with Israeli leaders. How, when, and where these can be implemented, what work needs to happen, and what understand.
You're a fucking dog. Fuck you. Okay? These are bloodthirsty, genocidal pig dog freaks. Okay? Every single one of them. They love wearing these Westerners. They love wearing their little fucking suits and their tie and acting so fucking proper. But the reality on the ground is that they are engaging in an ethnic cleansing campaign, okay? Remember, the aesthetics of it, due to so much Orientalism, is that Arabs are the barbarians, right? They're the barbarians. They wear, like, clothes that are not Western, and you know, they give off the presence of poverty due to obvious, you know, external factors, but they're somehow lesser than human. Meanwhile, the people that are dehumanizing them are the ones who are wearing the suits. They speak like you. You understand what they're saying. They speak with liberal language about how unfortunate the human casualties are. Meanwhile, what they're fucking doing is justifying an ethnic cleansing campaign. Aren't you dehumanizing them in the same light that you wouldn't want be given to Palestinians? Dude. This is dehumanizing a fucking Nazi. for the crime of being a fucking fascist. Suck my dick if you can't comprehend the difference there. Okay? I can't believe I would dehumanize the Secretary of State. Come on. Come on. And it's not for an inalienable or it's not for some unchangeable quality that I am fucking saying that they're disgusting pieces of shit. Okay? It's a quality that I want him to change, which is, again, to take a stand against ethnic cleansing. Okay? Let's watch this.
Standings must be reached.
By the way, at 3 p.m., I will have Noah Colwyn on, and we're going to go through Ben Shapiro's ahistorical video that has like 4 million views about here's the actual truth about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the comprehensive history.
We recognize this would take time to prepare and coordinate as well with international partners. A number of legitimate questions were raised in our discussions today, including how to use any period of pause to maximize the flow of humanitarian assistance, how to connect a pause to the release of hostages, how to ensure that...
Man, this is so anti-Semitic. Yo, Blinken better be blicked up, dude. He speaks, he keeps talking this anti-Semitic game, dude. I don't know.
Hamas doesn't use these pauses or arrangements to its own advantage. These are issues that we need to tackle urgently, and we believe they can be solved. We've agreed to have our teams continue to discuss practical solutions. I've instructed our special envoy for Middle East humanitarian issues, David Satterfield, who's been doing remarkable work here over the last couple of weeks, to continue these discussions. Ultimately, we believe this can be a critical mechanism for protecting civilians while enabling Israel to achieve its objectives of defeating Hamas.
Anthony Blinken emphasizing those issues of humanitarian aid, a possible pause. Those are issues which matter to Arab leaders across the region. And now that his talks in Israel have finished, the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is heading to Jordan, where he will meet the Jordanian foreign minister. Jordan, of course, has already pulled its ambassador from Israel. Well, let's look at the other top speech this hour by the leader of the Iranian-backed Lebanese group Hezbollah. He delivered, Hassan Nasrallah, his first public speech in secret since the beginning of the Israel-Gaza war. It was a speech that was widely anticipated and quite a lot of concern that his address could inflame passions and be a catalyst for a wider conflict. Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah said in his 90-minute speech, said the attack by Hamas, which, like Hezbollah, is a designated terror group by the British and American governments, was, in his words, right, wise and courageous and at the right time. But he emphasized that the battle was 100% Palestinian, and it was for the Palestinian people and did not relate to any regional issues, in effect saying that pushing back against accusations that Iran, Hezbollah's closest ally, was behind what happened in Gaza. But the Hezbollah leader did warn of the possibility of all-out war was, in his words, realistic. We didn't broadcast that speech live, but we can bring you an excerpt. Let's take a listen.
This is the first operation which has been a historic point and blessed point. This was a Palestinian decision, 100% and supported by the Palestinians 100%.
Hassan Nasrallah.
All right, so let's just go through it. Seamus is really good, obviously, and he broke it down for everybody. If you don't want to watch the entire thing, because like the translation is like kind of rough and hard to listen to. Yeah, he has a Herman Miller. Hasan also has a Herman Miller, just as I do. Okay. Anyway, speech from Nasrallah is starting off with an obviously somber note, making sure to mention all the groups in Lebanon who have had fighters killed by the IDF, and also includes mentioning the journalists targeted by the Israeli artillery in South Lebanon. Nasrallah gives assurances to the families of the dead that they should be comforted by the idea that those who were killed by fighting for Palestine died for, from a human perspective, from an ethical perspective, the most clear battle in the world. Nasrallah, by the way, for those of you who don't understand, like, Nasrallah is an incredibly important political figure in the Islamic world. Okay, like this person is a pivotal figure in the Islamic world in general, in any kind of in any kind of movement against like Western imperialism in general. So the reason why this speech was important was basically the most important non-Shia voice outside of Iran. So no, he's not just in Iran. He absolutely is. No, he 100% is important. What the fuck are you talking about? Non-Iranian Shia voice outside of Iran. He is an incredibly important voice. You're absolutely incorrect. I watched the Al Jazeera live translation as well, but it's just like too long. I don't want to go through it. Yes, he is Shia. Sorry. I was reading Delayed Autistic Gubby. He corrected himself. So Nasrallah gives assurances to the families of the dead that they should be comforted by the idea that those who were killed by fighting for Palestine died for, from a human perspective, from an ethical perspective, the most clear battle in the world. Okay? Nasrallah moves to criticize this extremist, stupid, idiotic government in Israel with this stupid minister responsible for abuses against Palestinian prisoners, undoubtedly referring to Itamar Ben-Gvir. I think it is obvious that even if you're not watching it, but Nasrallah has been turned up to 10 from almost the second minute on. Nasrallah shoots down any suggestions that the Hamas attack on October 7th was planned alongside, saying that it was a 100% Palestinian decision, and that, moreover, they hid the plans from any other party within Gaza and the larger axis of resistance, which includes Hezbollah. So this is consistent with both what the IDF has said. It is consistent with both the American State Department's messaging. It's also consistent with what Iran has said as well. So there is, at this point, no reason not to believe it. At first, I was skeptical because I thought there's no fucking way that such a broad military operation, such a broad militant operation would be done without without Iranians knowing about it. And I thought even that America saying that Iran was not involved, okay, in this operation, Iran was not involved. This does not mean that Iran isn't giving them weapons and training, by the way. Of course they are. Of course they are. Make no mistake. Iran absolutely is training militants inside of Palestine, inside of Gaza. They 100% are doing that, okay? They are definitely doing that. But this operation in and of itself was not conducted with the Iranian go-ahead. Okay? That's an important distinction to make here. So in Lebanon, Shia had the image of shoe shiners and were historically the poorest in the country. Shia in the country view Hezbollah as not only the power that removed them from Israeli occupation, but they also experienced immaterial improvements under Hezbollah as well. I don't like Hezbollah, but just explaining things. No, I mean, I think it's a pretty valid take. Hezbollah has always had, while Hezbollah is treated or is perceived in the West as like I am technically Sunni. I'm Sunni Muslim. I'm not Shia, okay? My name is Hasan. I'm Turkish. I'm a Sunni Muslim. I'm from a Sunni Muslim family. I am not Shia, okay? This doesn't have any bearing on my analysis of the situation in any capacity whatsoever because I'm not even like a practicing religious Muslim, okay? Yeah, a lot of Shias are also named Hasan, including Mehdi Hasan. Mehdi Hasan's name is not Hasan. His last name is Hasan. My first name is Hasan. But anyway, it doesn't matter. There are Shias who are named Hasan as well. The reason why I brought it up, oh my God, why is everybody trying to pick apart every single thing I'm saying? The reason why I brought up my name is so that you understand that yes, it is a Muslim name. Hasan is a Muslim name, but I myself am not religious, okay? That wasn't to say that I'm not Shia. Okay. Yes. Hezbollah in the Muslim world is praised because of its emancipatory results from the Israeli regime. Exactly. Israeli occupation. So Nasrallah says the choice for Hamas was either to act now or to accept the West Bank and Al-Aqsa to be lost and Palestinian prisoners inside Israel to all die, and that Hamas anticipated Israel's massive response to its attack. Nasrallah brings up the testimonies of survivors of Hamas's attack on settlements around Gaza about how the IDF ended up killing many Israeli civilians in the initial counterattack on October 7th, possibly referencing the report made by Electronic Intifada. This is still held in question. We still don't know. The only testimony we have is from Yasmin Parat, who was one of the Israeli victims on October 7th that survived, one of the Israeli survivors from the attacks on the kibbutzim. She spoke to the Israeli state radio broadcast, and that broadcast has now been completely fucking lasered off of the internet. It is, that there is definitely a very clear cut. There's definitely a very clear interest in just trying to communicate October 7th as like as clearly as possible, trying to message around it as clearly as possible. This does not mean that October 7th wasn't brutal. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that the Palestinian militant movement was Palestinian militants were not shooting random civilians. They absolutely were. Okay, they were 100%. Anyway, let's continue. Nasrallah brings up the multitude of different goals Israel has set to destroy Hamas or some wing of Hamas, and brings up that Israel set similar goals in 2006 during its war in Lebanon for Hezbollah and evidently failed. Nasrallah mentions yesterday's video of the Hamas fighter running up to the Israeli tank and placing an explosive on it, and asks, how will this army, the IDF, fight in such an environment? Which they won't. They won't. No matter what happens. If they withstand like any casualties, they'll just go back and keep fucking bombing civilians and blow up ambulances and shit. If Palestine were currently in the process of genociding the entirety of Israel, I'm fairly sure Hasan would speak out about it. I'm pretty sure the dude just doesn't enjoy genocide. Yes, 1,000,000%. If the roles were reversed, yes, I would absolutely be speaking out about it. If there was a dominant Arab Muslim population that had pushed a Jewish population that lived there into fucking ghettos and was routinely bombing them and engaging in the act of ethnic cleansing, that America was like somehow also funding and facilitating this ethnic cleansing, I would absolutely be against it. Of course. Yes, I am and always will be anti-genocide. Okay? Nasrallah calls out the focus on false reports of children being beheaded by Hamas when it is being largely ignored that there are children who are being shredded apart in Gaza. Nasrallah commends correct and courageous attacks by resistance Axis fighters in Iraq against American military installations, as he says the war in Gaza is entirely America's decision. This is also correct. Nasrallah says that those who remain silent about Israel's war on Gaza should reconsider their humanity if they're really humans or not, and their religion if they belong to a certain religion, and reconsider their honor if they believe they have any honor. Nasrallah specifically mentions that the victory of the Palestinians is in the national interest of Egypt and Jordan, the first two Arab countries to have made peace with Israel. Nasrallah just took another drink of water, and the crowd has launched into chants of Labaik Ya Nasrallah, here I am at your service, Nasrallah. Nasrallah says that many people expect him to announce that Hezbollah will start intervening today, but reminds viewers that they started fighting the day after Hamas attack despite their surprise at the attack itself. Now, this is important because it shows the level of response that Hezbollah will engage in, which means it's not going to be like a real retaliation in the way that Israel has been afraid of before. Like, Israel has always had to regulate its actions in the Gaza Strip every time it does a siege, because there's always a fear of another front opening up, right? This to me indicates that another front is not opening up in northern Israel. As I said, I told you before the speech that he would probably set red lines on what he finds to be completely unacceptable, the boundaries of what kind of set boundaries for like the brutality that Israel is engaging in, and then and basically not commit to a full-scale invasion. Okay? This is the reason why the, I think, Iranian foreign minister said that, even before the speech, the Iranian foreign minister had said that, yes, there are Hezbollah militants that have immediately started intervening and immediately started firing on Israeli territory. However, these are militant factions that are operating outside of our control. Of course, they're going to do that. We think it's great. They should do it. Like, basically, they were saying this is totally morally permissible, except it's not being directed by us. This is what the official Iranian position was, which is also important to consider here. The speech is now pivoting to making the current border clashes with Israel take on more importance, saying that they are unprecedented since 2006 and they will not be limited to this scale. Hezbollah says if it were satisfied to just claim solidarity and hold regular protests, Israel would have sent its entire army into Gaza. But because of Hezbollah's involvement, half of the IDF soldiers are on the Lebanese border. He says this is approximate, not exact. So he's taking credit for at least splitting some of the IDF. I don't know how truthful that is, by the way. I'm sure that there is definitely, I know that there is mobilization in that area as well. Specifically, I know that they've also evacuated some of the villages, for example. But, I mean, it does seem like he's saying, like, we're pulling. He did not say half, but a third. Nasrallah says the blood spilled by Hezbollah and Hezbollah allied fighters in the south thus far sends a message that you, Israel, will commit the biggest act of stupidity in your life if you do this: invade Lebanon. Nasrallah uses that eternal phrase, we love an American foreign policy. All options are on the table. It's absolutely an applause line here, though. The crowd is going nuts, because the expectation from the entire world that is watching this, that is not aligned with the Israeli ethnic cleansing campaign, is that the Axis powers, like the Iranian coalition, is supposed to intervene to put a stop to it, or at least intervene enough that that the Israeli forces are withered and they are focusing on two different fronts now with a serious enemy that they have lost to in the past.
صدق ووضوح وغموض بناء أيضا.
Nasrallah now hitting out against the threat of American intervention, saying that U.S. Navy ships in the Mediterranean don't scare us and never did, and asked the U.S. to not forget its humiliating withdrawal from Afghanistan, as well as its defeats in Iraq and in Lebanon itself. Nasrallah says that America can end Israel's aggression on Gaza because it is their aggression. He says that Israel's aggression is America's aggression, which he's right. The onus to stop a possible regional war is entirely on America, and that American interests, naval ships, and soldiers will pay the price if they expand their role. This part is very, very important. He's literally saying, he's not just like saying, listen, Israel, we're going to fucking invade. He's saying we are going to attack American soldiers. Like, we will open up and turn this into a, not just a regional war, but a global one. Nasrallah addresses Gaza and the West Bank and tells them that just as Iranian leader Khamenei told them in 2006, that Hezbollah will come out victorious against Israel. He's telling them the only outcome of this current war is certain victory against Israel. And the hotly awaited Nasrallah speech is over. No overt declaration of war, as I think many people anticipated. I did not. But certainly raises the stakes of the current border clashes on the Israeli border, and I think makes Hezbollah's current calculus with Gaza clearer. So, I think this was expected, given the actions taken so far from Iranian-backed forces. The fact that it's like mostly just Yemen engaging in bombing on Israel, and at least some militancy against like American positions and Israeli positions in Syria, but overall, why do people say Hezbollah won against the IDF in 2006 when they neither won or lost? I mean, think about it. Why do people say that about Vietnam? Why do people say that about Vietnam? So is Hezbollah Lebanon's army, or is it a terrorist group as the United States claims? Hezbollah isn't just an army, is not just a standing military, but it also, on top of that, has like local governance duties as well. Not dissimilar to how Hamas operates in Gaza. Hamas has a military, a standing army, alongside other standing militant groups as well. However, Hezbollah is not the Hezbollah is a militant group that also has a political party and has political aspirations and works in governance as well. So, for example, Hamas has the entirety of the political power of governance in Gaza, right? That wasn't the case for a very long time, but since the failed coup that America tried to do, shouts out to George W. Bush, Hamas has completely controlled Gaza ever since 2006, 2007. So what that means is there's also you can't just like be a fucking militant group. You have to also run hospitals, and you have to redirect funds, and you have to have schools. You have to have a working sewage system. Like, these are all the things that you have to do. And Hamas, of course, runs all of that as well. So there's a political faction there as well. This does not mean that they're monolithic. This does not mean that there aren't internal rifts, both in the foreign demonstrations, like both in the foreign policymakers and on the Hamas side. There's different factions within Hamas as well, and I would say that the internal governance inside of Gaza is not entirely removed from the paramilitary, or not entirely removed from, like, I guess if you want to call it the standing army, but certainly their interests are very different. So by saying they bested them in battle, they legitimize the ops and they manufacture consent for military spending and actions. Israeli here, I know the most important thing for Israel is to stop bombing fucking civilians if they want to stop Palestinian extremism, among many other problems. But regardless, is there a way for Israel to give Gazans money and resources without it being snugged by Hamas, maybe through UN organizations? And yes, obviously this would never happen, just a hypothetical question. Well, my point is this. It depends on what you mean by Hamas getting the resources, right? Like, Israel will say the fuel is going to Hamas. Now, if you're talking about the fuel going to the hospitals run by the Gazan Health Ministry, then yes, technically the fuel is going to Hamas, because Hamas as a political party is the Gazan Health Ministry. That there is truth to that, but those are fucking doctors. Those aren't the militants. It's not going to like rockets. You know what I mean? So no matter what you do, because this is the environment that Israel has created, it's one that Israel also personally understands is one that they have to like work around. It's really strange because, like, in times of siege, In times of siege, Israel will go, everyone's a Hamas target, everyone's a viable target. That's why we have to kill every single person. But in times when there's no siege and there's just simply an occupation, of course they work with like the politicians to a certain degree, knowing full well that some of those funds will end up in the hands of militant groups as well. This still benefits the political calculus that Netanyahu is engaged in up until October 7th, when Israel paid a very vicious price for said political calculation. That political calculation turned into a miscalculation the moment that this endless cycle of like ritualistically humiliating and effectively neutering the collaborative entity that represents Palestinians by showing Palestinians, if you collaborate with us, you are the Palestinian Authority. We are going to do nothing for you. We're going to keep killing you. We're going to keep fucking you over. We're going to keep taking more of your land. We're going to steal it. And there's nothing you can do about it. And there's nothing the Palestinian Authority can do about it. Pushing people into the violent emancipatory side, understanding that, okay, well, there's no other option here. There's like no other option. We're trying to fucking collaborate, even though you're spitting in our fucking face and killing us. And, you know, I guess like there's no way to retaliate. So Hamas's goals overall on October 7th, and it's not just Hamas as well. This was militant factions across the board. Their goal overall was to basically say, at least my assessment on the situation was that we're done. There's no more Western support. There's no more fucking possible support from anybody else. Israel has to understand that there is a price to pay for the endless occupation and the endless brutality that Palestinians are subjected to in the West Bank. There has to be a response for it. And the response was bloody, and the response was brutal. The response was ruthless. Okay? But never forget, it is always the occupying power that sets the standard for brutality. Because like I always repeat, the first intifada was fought with rocks and fought with strikes. The second intifada, at a time when negotiations were ongoing, where the Israeli government was openly humiliating and withering away Arafat's political power amongst the Palestinian population deliberately, at a time when the more militant factions like Hamas recognized and openly stated the only way to fight back is through violent means, okay? Israel had all the power to show the world and show the Palestinians that, yes, we can and will collaborate in good faith with those who are opening up their hands and meeting our demands, no matter how fucking unreasonable and how utterly unjustifiable those demands were from the Israeli side. Arafat said yes to everything, pretty much, every step of the way, until it was like, and while that was going on, Hamas clearly had different opinions on the matter. For example, Hamas even sided with the Syrian opposition in 2012, which led to a falling out with Iran and Hezbollah for a time. Important to understand Nasrallah and Hezbollah's position in the Sunni world, which is overly very negative. His comments are seen as coming an organization that in 2013 participated in the essential ethnic cleansing of Sunni Muslims in Syria, who sided with the Syrian opposition, killing 500,000 people and participated in about 10 to 20 Gaza Strip-style sieges in places like Eastern Ghouta, Kalamoun, Aleppo, etc. For example, Hamas even sided with the Syrian opposition in 2012, which led to the falling out with Iran and Hezbollah for a time. Wait. I have to pee really quickly, but I'll be back in a second. We'll watch this
across
for now,
Lebanon today. Massive screens were set up for public viewing. Many would have watched that speech there. Let's go to southern Lebanon to join our Middle East correspondent Hugo Bechega. Hugo, I'm not sure whether you've had a chance.
Before I do that, also here's the 3-minute ad break now.
To speak to people in Lebanon what they made of this widely anticipated speech by Hassan Nasrallah, and the general assessment seems to be he didn't go as far as many feared he would.
Yeah, I think, Liz, lots of people are relieved here in Lebanon tonight. So I'm here in Beirut. I was at one of those screenings that had been organized by Hezbollah, a screening in a southern suburb of Beirut, which is a stronghold of the group. And I think there have been these concerns that this violence along the Lebanon-Israel border could escalate and Lebanon could be dragged into this conflict. So I think to give you some other lines of what Hasan had to say, he said that all options are on the table. He also said that the only way to prevent a regional conflict is to stop the war in Gaza. But again, we didn't have any kind of indication, any announcement that Hezbollah is preparing a major escalation in this conflict, which is perhaps, positive news given the recent fighting that has been happening along this border. But again, I think he left open the possibility that Hezbollah could escalate its attacks against Israel. He said that this would depend on the situation in Gaza and also how Israel responds to what Hezbollah has been doing. But again, before this speech, there was a lot of concern here that Hezbollah could be planning an escalation of those cross-border attacks that we've seen over the last few weeks since this Israel-Hamas war started. But today, after this much-anticipated speech, we haven't had any announcement that Hezbollah is preparing to.
My man keeps saying Hezbollah.
To escalate the situation along the border.
That has come as a huge relief to the people of Lebanon, as we've been reporting now almost since this war began, that they're mindful of how much they suffered in the last Lebanon-Israel war in 2006. So much, even in Beirut, was destroyed. And Hezbollah did suffer enormously too, even though Hassan Nasrallah mocked the United States and said, you're saying you're going to destroy Hamas now. Well, you said in 2000.
Israel is saying that journalists who are in Gaza are in on the Hamas propaganda. They're justifying killing them. Yeah, I know. I saw this. Jerusalem Post covered this, which I think is fucking ridiculous, like completely ridiculous. It is a fucking way to try and justify, I think, killing journalists. It's it's the same principle behind everything that they've done so far.
You're going to destroy Hezbollah, and here we are.
Exactly, and over the last few weeks, I've spent a lot of time, traveling along the border, visiting some villages. Some of those villages that have been hit by those Israeli strikes in response to those Hezbollah attacks. So lots of people still remember the devastation brought by the 2006 war. But Liz, I think we've got to say that Hezbollah is now a much stronger force than it was in 2006. It has an estimated 150,000 rockets, including precision-guided missiles that can strike deep inside Israeli territory. It also has tens of thousands of fighters, many of them who fought in the civil war in Syria. So it is considered by Israel a much more formidable force than Hamas. So that's why I think there have been these concerns from the Israelis, from
Hamas did work with the Syrian opposition against Bashar, who was an ally to Hezbollah and Iran. There was a falling out. Or I mean, I guess there was a minor, brief split, but Hamas was not pro-ISIS at any point. That part is incorrect. There was sectarian splits, potentially, but they were not, they were always anti-ISIS. They were always anti, like, I hate having this conversation about Syria. I don't like I don't like getting into the Syrian war conversation, because it is, I would say, by my estimates, even worse than the people that have incredibly strong opinions on it, or even worse than fucking like people who consider me to be a anti-Ukrainian actor who is like pro-Russia or whatever. They get way more aggro about it. There was a brief split between Hezbollah and Hamas on religious issues, but Hamas was never pro-ISIS. They very quickly changed their position. Syrian civil war was a mess. Yes. There was no And it doesn't matter because those issues have clearly been resolved, because ultimately, and I've said this before, the sectarian differences have almost never been an issue, other than minor exceptions, brief interruptions, because the ultimate goal for Iran has never been I don't think they have an honest interest in the emancipation of Palestinians. I think that the Iranian forces and their interest in Hamas or any kind of militancy has always revolved around not like religious boundaries at all, but instead a way to disrupt Israeli politics, a way to use militancy against Israel when they feel as though Israel has over leveraged themselves. That's it. Their goal is to basically disrupt Israel's regional influence, especially when considering that the other enemy that they have is Saudi Arabia, Iran, I mean. There's, of course, a more important sectarian infighting in that situation, like religious disagreements in that situation. But even then, it's still about having influence in the region. And Saudi Arabia, just like, especially modern Saudi Arabia, just like Israel, is seen as an extension of American foreign policy in the region, American intervention in the region. These are American proxies.
From the Americans, many others, that the situation here could escalate and this could become another front in the conflict. I think what was also interesting in this speech by Hasan Nasrallah was that he said the group wouldn't be intimidated by those warnings from the Americans, from the Israelis, and that the group wouldn't be intimidated by those fleets, those ships that have been, warships that have been sent by the Americans to the region. So again, I think what Hezbollah is trying to do is to say that the situation can change, but today we haven't had that announcement that Hezbollah is planning a major escalation of the situation here.
Hugo Bachega, thank you very much for joining us. Yes, Hasan Nasrallah, a lot of defiant rhetoric against the United States, even using the phrase that has been used in Iran since the Iranian Revolution of 19...
Al-Qaeda and ISIS-K members were funded and trained by American proxies in the region to fight the Syrian government. Also, Al-Qaeda was prominent. I guess, actually, prominent is not the right word, but Al-Qaeda operatives were also in Yemen as well, at the behest of Saudi Arabia, once again, using our American weapons again. I don't know if you guys know who Al-Qaeda is. You know, they did a little thing called 9/11. So, you know.
1979, that the United States is the...
Iran doesn't care about Palestinians. They want to become a global power, and thus the U.S.'s interest being the same leads them to competing, and it being beneficial to Iran to destabilize U.S. proxies. I mean, I don't know if they want to become a global power. I think they want to become a regional power, which they are, and they want to maintain their regional influence. I don't think Iran has the capacity to become a global power when they're effectively shut off in a world that is completely dominated. In a world that is completely dominated by America.
The great Satan. Let's get a bit more analysis of what the head of the Lebanese Islamist group had to say a short time ago.
Well, here's a question I have for some people. I've seen this a lot in my chat as well. There's a lot of people from Yemen who said, Hasan, your coverage of Yemen has been frustrating as someone from Yemen. What I don't understand is, do you think what Saudi Arabia was doing is good in Yemen? I am legitimately asking. No, okay, both sides suck. I agree with you. And the way I always operate when it comes down to it, when I look at a situation, I look at my own personal experience. I always use the same example, okay? And similar principles for Syria as well. The exact same thing happens in Turkey too, okay? Obviously, the material conditions are much different, because Syria and Yemen are not in the Western sphere of influence in the same way Turkey is, being a NATO ally and being a very important NATO ally during the Cold War, right? However, having said that, America is genuinely incredibly involved in Turkish affairs, internal politics in Turkey, and what ends up happening, at least by my assessment, by my estimations, always is that I am most likely going to side with a nation's right to self-determination, and in a situation like the Turkish coup that occurred after a parallel government was established by Fethullah Gülen, a CIA asset, who literally came up within the same forces, within the same religious forces alongside Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and that's why they were able to set up such a solid network of operatives inside of the Turkish court system, inside of the Turkish police force, inside of the Turkish military. And when the coup happened in Turkey, this is not a cap. This is not cap at all. This is 100% real. I despise Recep Tayyip Erdogan. I am not sure if I would have my freedom if I went back to Turkey. Okay? But having said that, most Turkish people, even those who also are still in Turkey who fucking despise Recep Tayyip Erdogan, will openly state this. Fethullah Gülen is a CIA asset, and Fethullah Gülen facilitated the coup in Turkey. This is 100% true. Like, undeniably true, and it's something that Erdogan's greatest opposition will also admit. So why? Why is it that as someone who is like, who's been threatened by the Erdogan administration before, or someone, a proxy from the Erdogan administration before, for my coverage over the coup in Turkey, as a matter of fact, am I still saying that I would much prefer Recep Tayyip Erdogan to continue controlling the country instead of Fethullah Gülen? Why? Because I understand that no matter what happens, okay, Erdogan is the enemy that you know. Okay? He's the enemy that you know. He's the enemy that is still Turkish. Whereas Fethullah Gülen is an American power. That is very different. Do you get it? So my understanding, and maybe it might lead me to be misguided in certain instances for other countries. It's not always a one-to-one comparison, of course. But my understanding always comes from, if you're stuck between two separate powers, one is a regional power, one is the global superpower. The global superpower that is funding and facilitating the other regional power, Saudi Arabia in this circumstance, is almost always going to be worse than the militant faction that has been funded by the regional power on the other hand. It's always being, what is this? Do you realize how stupid Hasan is after the complete sidestep of an answer and just yap fest? It's funny that you say that, but the dude from Yemen says he's nuanced and correct and you're an idiot. I love white guys. I love the fucking swagged out, quirked up white boys being like, wow, I can't believe you sidestepped the answer and didn't give a clear-cut definitional answer. I wonder if the reason why it's so easy for you to make these assertions is because the only way that you can understand what happens in this fucking region is by reading a goddamn, like, American Enterprise Institute cutout article that you read that gives you clear and definitional answers, like black and white, as though that is how you're supposed to look at this. I'm Iranian. I fucking hate the IRGC. I also don't want the Pahlavis in power, and I don't want U.S. involvement in the country. What you say speaks to me very closely. Yes, Iranians living in Iran understand this reality better than anyone else, because Iran is the country that was completely fucking destroyed by Western forces. Like, the Iran that you know of today, is directly an invention of American intervention. Completely. In many respects, it's like, it's America's involvement in Iran, in the most reductive terms, is very similar to Israel's involvement with I'm diaspora, but yes, lots of diaspora is fucking insane. Oh yeah, well, I thought you were actually still in Iran because of your takes. Most people that I hear from Iranian diaspora are like, we need to glass Iran immediately. Let's continue.
I spoke to our security correspondent, Frank Gardner, to ask about the statements emphasized by Hezbollah that the attacks carried out by Hamas in southern Israel on October the 7th were 100% Palestinian.
They know, because it's been made very clear to them both by Israel and the United States, that if Hezbollah gets involved, if it embarks on a full-scale war with Israel, which would be hugely damaging for Israel, it would be devastating for Lebanon. And Hezbollah is not just the most powerful military force.
The greatest, wait, when I gotta say this, what I gotta fucking say is this. If you want these countries to have autonomy, if you want them to fucking fight for democracy, a secular democracy, you got to let them be without Iranian, because opportunist reactionary forces will always seize control because they are the most violent ones oftentimes, and they will always seize control, and they are the most aggressive anti-Western movements in said countries. Taliban is another example of this too. It's
Hasan.
just, it has happened, I guess by accident, in every fucking Muslim country that America has involved itself in. Even if they're Muslim Shia, Muslim Sunni, doesn't fucking matter. I think one of the issues people may have is the massive division in Yemen between the two centers of power, the Iranian-backed Houthis in Sana'a and the Saudi-led coalition-backed government in Aden. I mean, I know that's what a lot of people are upset about, but I'm not saying one side is better than the other by, I mean, I'm saying it's more complicated. It's not like the situation it's not like the situation in Palestine, but I do know what Saudi has done. I do know what the Saudi-led coalition has done so far, or has allowed so far to happen to Yemen. So yes, I think in a situation where you have one side that is bad, and the other side that's much worse, I'm going to go with the side that's bad rather than the side that's much worse. Like, one side is doing a fucking famine. Like, no, I think maybe people are misunderstanding. If people refer to Houthi actions as that of Yemen, again, that's my speculation. You can't both sides this again. No, I'm openly stating that one side is an American proxy that has instituted a blockade that literally created a genocide. This is not my statement on the matter. This is the assessment of international human rights organizations. And in a situation where you have the American proxy doing genocide to an entire population over their interest in who gets to control who gets to control the fucking government and who gets to control the people, then yeah, I'm going to side with the people that didn't do that, the people that fought against that, regardless of who's backing them. But it also on top, and that's the reason why I say Yemen instead of specifying it as the Houthi regime. I'm ignorant on the matter, but weren't the stage coup power grab allegations in the Turkey coup? Any insight on the situation? No. There were allegations that it was a stage coup, but it was a real one. Like, people fucking got ruthlessly slaughtered. There were planes that were getting fucking refueled on American military bases. Like, this is a real thing that occurred. Erdogan took advantage of that. America has a long history of facilitating coups, some of which fail and end up with an even more reactionary or even with a more galvanized, newly galvanized, more fucking reactionary center of power. This is what happened in Turkey. Turkey changed its entire constitution after, with a referendum, by the way, like that they democratically voted on, changing it to a presidential structure rather than the parliamentary one. And that was a consequence of the coup that failed. It doesn't ever go in the opposite direction, though. There's no, like, you just described the entire 20th century in Latin America. Well, in 20th century Latin America, usually those coups still work, though. Maybe by proxy, or maybe because of the proximity, or maybe because of America's power overall at the time. But usually those coups do fucking work. You know what I mean? Usually those coups do work.
In Lebanon, it's not just an Iranian allied and backed militia. It's a vital part of the Lebanese political scene. And a lot of Lebanese have been saying, please don't do this. Lebanon's economy is already in crisis. It pretty much collapsed 4 years ago. It's not in a good state. And Israel has made it very clear that if there is a full-scale war, at the moment there's a kind of low-grade skirmishing taking place on that border between Lebanon and Israel, that northern border of Israel. There are casualties on both sides. There's exchanges of fire, but it's limited. It's calibrated. It's been carefully calibrated by Hezbollah to show their support for Hamas, but not to provoke Israel so much that they get a devastating response in return. But reading into that speech, I think the big subtext, the word that was missing, that I didn't see, maybe you did, Iran. They're at great pains to say this Hamas attack on October the 7th, which they praised, which has been condemned by much of the world, certainly most of the Western world, but also by leaders such as in the UAE. They've made it clear that was a Palestinian operation. In other words, Iran wasn't behind it. There was a big suspicion in Israel and some other places that Iran had somehow given it its blessing and its backing. Iran has said, no, we approve of it, but we didn't do it.
Yes, very interesting using this phrase that the Hamas attacks of October the 7th, which, of course, in his vocabulary, describing them as glorious, a seismic earthquake, as he put it, was 100% Palestinian. But also, Frank, not just saying that this wasn't the doing of Iran, but saying that groups like Hezbollah, like the militias.
I think, once again, all right, I want to mention something here. Every single Turkish person, every single Syrian person, every single person from Yemen, every single Egyptian person that is in this chat right now that may agree or disagree with me on my assessment. But if there's one thing that unites every single person in the region, okay, especially if they have a moral compass, is Israel's actions against Palestinians. Like that's it. It doesn't matter what your ideological background is. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you despise in your own governance. This is something that I saw in the Turkish protests, where you had like the Turkish Communist Party, okay, pulling up with PFLP flags, okay, Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine flags, alongside like Islamist components within Turkey, pulling up with fucking Hamas flags and Islamic Jihad flags to protest alongside one another, with liberals, of course. Not a lot of liberals, but with liberals, of course, nowhere to be seen. Liberals across the board are, both in Canada and everywhere else, are the ones who are the most like pro-Israel. This much is consistent. If there is like something. If there's something I can point to, I would say it's usually liberals that are like, whether they're in Canada, whether they're in the United States of America. Well, in America, both sides are liberals, but, yeah, those are the motherfuckers that are always like, no, Israel, what Israel's doing is pog.
In Iraq and Syria and Yemen also had their own leadership, that this was simply not the doings of Iran, to say don't make it look as though we are the puppets of Iran, which of course has been part of the
I think one aspect of this conflict that everyone needs to understand is that this is the standard going forward. It does feel like no matter what happens, it feels like any other conflict in the future, from this point on, it is going to be America versus the Fuck America coalition. Straight up. Like, it's not even, like, this is the reason why the first countries that immediately, the first countries from the Western Hemisphere that have come out and spoken in favor of Palestinians have been some of the Latin American countries, right? And it will continue no matter what. Like, no matter where there is any kind of like political confusion or any kind of political movements, it's usually going to be people speaking out against American intervention and those who defend American intervention. Now, as it stands, European powers, with the exception of Ireland, are standing firmly on Team America's side. Firmly and unconditionally. Countries that are not immediately in the sphere of Western influence, however, are slowly but surely ranging from, subtle criticisms all the way to unambiguous support, turning around and defending Palestinians.
Dialogue surrounding this war, this concern that Iran will in effect turn the tap on with this so-called arc of resistance?
Yeah, I don't think many people will buy that, the disassociation of Iran from this, because Iran has been very heavily involved in spreading, partly through its Quds force, which is part of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps. It's the external operation arm of the Revolutionary Guards, the Pasdaran. It has been very effective in spreading its military influence right across the Middle East. So in Iraq, it's got what's called the popular, and when Arabs use the word popular, the actual Arabic word is sha'abi, which means peoples, rather than popular as in beloved. So the Popular Mobilization Forces is an Iranian allied militia in Iraq. There's them, there is Hezbollah in Lebanon, there are other groups in Syria, and then of course there's the Houthis in Yemen, who have recently been firing missiles towards Israel. They've all been shot down either by Israeli or US warships. But this is when people talk about regional escalation. There is the fear that various fires could be lit, perhaps fanned and encouraged from Tehran, but hard to actually trace their hand in it directly, that is surrounding Israel. Now, the big fear here is that if Hezbollah, and this is why this speech today was so important, I'm not seeing anything in it that says we're about to go to war. So there's, I think, a little bit of a relief there. But if Hezbollah was to fully join in a war together with Hamas, Israel would find itself fighting a war on two fronts, and quite possibly when the US says to Israel, we've got your back, that would mean the involvement of US warships offshore in the Mediterranean, probably using some of their firepower to hit Hezbollah.
Analysis of that first Hasan Nasrallah speech by our security correspondent around the world and across the United Kingdom. You're watching BBC News.
The latest on the crisis in the Middle East, Secretary of State